quality and 50% social value contributions. And in paragraph 15, it details all the premises that will be covered. So it would be all the community centres, Astley Hall, the Town Hall, Market Walk, etc., etc. So, and Chorley Markets. It's a fairly simplistic proposal. It's been benchmarked over recent years because of this inflation currently standing. We think this will be a sufficient budget to go and negotiate that contract. That's the proposals. Any questions at all? A stunned silence. Somebody happy to second that? Councillor Hilton, very good, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Done, thank you. Right, that's that one. The next item of business is broadly similar and maintains the theme. It's the janitorial and sundry products contracts on pages 25 to 36 of your agendas, which I'll just get to. And again, this is a contract to go out for, as it says, janitorial and sundry items. Similar to the last report, it details that we are looking into one contract across Chorley and South Ribble. Again, a 3 and 2 year contract arrangements, 3 years with 2 year extension. Circa £30,000 for Chorley Council, and obviously we'll have to build in that ability to share that in future with South Ribble if so required. Similar weighting, 70% price, 50% quality, 15% social value. A slightly shorter list of the premises where these will be used because it's for the larger premises of community centres, Town Hall, Astley Hall, etc. And therefore a fairly simple proposal that again we delegate the decision, as it says in the recommendations, to myself to award the contract and approve the joint procurement with South Ribble Borough Council. Any questions on that? Don't ask me what janitorial products are. I could give you a long list, I imagine, brushes and things. That's as much as my depth of knowledge is. That's my proposal. Any seconders, please? Thank you, Councillor France in the back row. All those in favour, please show. That's done. Thank you. That's accepted. Approved. Right. We romp on to item 6, which is Councillor Wilson, and is a revenue budget outturn.
Thank you, Chair. So as the report outlines, we have a underspend for this for the financial year. So that underspend we've been reporting regularly, of course, to Cabinet, has seen it sort of the variations through the year. So the total underspend is 1.3 million. We've already allocated a substantial portion of that for those members who obviously are new to the council. As I say, it's reported on a quarterly basis, so we've already allocated it as we go through the year. So £600,000 is towards the costs of local government reorganisation, which of course we're still awaiting details of exactly what that reorganisation is going to be, but we know that it's estimated to be in the tune of about £730,000 for each council in Lancashire. So we think it's wise to set that fund aside now. We've set a further £250,000 away to the earmark reserve, which is the capital and repairs and maintenance reserves, which again is about looking after our assets and our buildings, and therefore that always needs topping up, as it were, as a reserve. And then the additional item in this report is the £150,000, again, which will go onto that local government reorganisation pot to make up that sort of 730, 750 total. In addition, we'll see that our general balances, as reported last time, were at 4.3 million, so the additional surplus here goes into the general balances. It takes it to 4.6, and as members will recall, we always said that the general balance would sit at £4 million. So I think there's more money in there, obviously, now. We need to perhaps look at that as we go into the next budget setting process. A, do we leave it there? B, do you sort of allocate it somewhere else? And then C, the age-old debate of, is £4 million the right amount of money to have in the general balance in the first place? So there's another job of work to do as we go through the budget setting process. In terms of where that underspend comes from, that's detailed from pages 39 onwards in the report. You can see probably the single biggest difference is in planning income. So we've had a lot more income come in through planning than we projected at the start of the year. But there's also savings where in directorates, which comes from mixture of reasons, some where staff vacancies exist, others where efficiencies have been made. In terms of the borrowing situation, you can see that the cost of our borrowing has actually gone down. Although I think I've just jumped to the next report, I apologise. I'll come to borrowing in the next item. But we can see there, as I say, that the balances are set at 4.6, and the earmark reserve is just under 10 million. So I'll stop. I'll pause there before I go on to my next report.
Like you've been too keen,
I know,
Peter.
I'm flying.
And I would just mention on behalf of the government, if nobody else, that the cost of LGR in every business case has been put forward is supposed to be recovered by the new authorities in the future. They reckon we'll be in a surplus after a number of years, according to the business case. Whether you believe that or not, it's up to you, but that's the proposal. So this is front loading of it, but all the councils are being asked to do it similarly, and we're all very equally unhappy about it, because the government should pay for it and then recover the money in due course, but that's the way they do it. Any questions on that report, Councillor Perks?
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Bear with us, quite a number of questions on. Do you want them all at once or one at a time? Because there's a lot. One at a time, right.
Yeah.
First one,
Yeah.
we noticed reading the papers, and it seems to be the same across all the directorates, that there are a lot of underspends on recruitment with the council. And a number of questions on this. Is there a problem with recruitment? And if there is, how is it affecting the council and how it delivers its services, and also in how it interacts with customers as well?
Okay, so in certain areas, yes. In certain areas, we're very challenging in terms of recruitment. So particularly, you have specialisms. So if you want building regs, planning officers, licensing, there is a general shortage in the local government world. So that's a challenge. One of the benefits we've had in certain areas is the shared services with South Ribble, because it's allowed us to fill, be a bit more resilient between the two councils. Some of it, though, is also where the funds have come from. So where we budgeted for posts, in some cases we use monies, let's say, like the UKSPF monies or something else, rather than having to use our own monies. So where it's showing is actually it's an underspend on the original budget, rather than actually that we're not spending any money because there's no one working in that department. They are, it's just that they're being paid out of a different pot. So the answer is a half and half scenario, Councillor Perks, in terms of yes, in areas it's challenging, but it's probably not as bad as it looks on that in terms of the underspend. In terms of the performance, we'll come to the performance report shortly in terms of the council performance. What I can say is generally our performance in terms of delivering our key strategies is excellent, because we're on 100% of our key projects are being delivered, and most of our targets, the vast majority, are being met or within sort of 5% or so of being met. So we can monitor performance through the year against that, as we do, but at the minute I would say the lack of staff is not having a major impact on frontline delivery of service.
Which is what we want. If we're paying less and getting better service, then that's the win-win, isn't it?
But then it does.
We've got more questions.
Yeah, sorry, it does beg the question then, if you've already got a high budget, why are you budgeting for something if you're coping?
Well, don't forget, of course, this changes every year, and you're absolutely right. So last year, if you were being sat here, we were reporting some underspends for various different reasons. One was because of the cost of utilities and inflation from the year before. Overspend, sorry, I apologise, overspends. For those reasons such as that, so it does vary wildly. So it's always a little bit difficult getting pretty precise. But as I say, some of that is because monies are being used from different areas to pay for those members of staff. Okay.
Particularly on demand-led services. So
absolutely.
Planning, we have no idea what planning applications we're getting over next year, or licensing applications or anything else, have we?
Thanks for that answers. Second one, on the Community and Leisure Directorate, I want to ask a question about the 1.259 grant that got from the government regarding 4 schemes. And Homes for Ukraine, the Forced Migration, the Syrian and the Afghan. Now, I'm familiar with the Homes for Ukraine scheme, because because I've had 4 Ukrainians living with me as their sponsor, and I've got another one coming on Saturday. But we'd like to know what numbers of people, individuals involved in the 4 schemes, and then on from that, what do the other 3 schemes involve and cover?
Which page are you
Like
referring to?
the Homes for Ukraine scheme relies on a sponsor.
Yeah, which page in paragraph are you referring to, Councillor?
It's the last paragraph just before 18.
Page 41.
Yeah.
Okay, so I might ask Bev to come in with some details. In terms of the exact numbers, I can't. I'll have to find that out, or
Okay.
I'll let you know because off the top of my head, I don't want to guess.
You can let us know.
And get it wrong. So obviously, you know about the Homes for Ukraine. The Syrian is Syria. You have to excuse me, I need my glasses. The Syrian refugees. So this was developed in. We did this first tranche in 2020. Was it straight after COVID? 22, 21, 22. And that the first tranche had 10 families. So these are people who had been living in camps, as it were, after being forced out of their homes, had been processed by the government. So we knew that they were looking for homes. Their first point of contact is obviously with the county councils, and then they asked us to provide specific homes, which we did, and then we did the second tranche in 24 or 5. About two years after that, the second tranche. Now, what we've found is quite interesting is that a number of those people who came the first time have moved on, have subsequently moved on, perhaps to other families or other people that they know. Clearly, our commitment is relatively small compared to the vast number of, the vast numbers involved. But what we found very early on is that we did quite a bit of good work, and I'll let Bev or Jennifer speak more about when they first came over to actually work with officers at the county council to help integrate it and when they go into when the kids are in schools and stuff like that. So this is obviously part of the United Kingdom government's obligation to the Syrians after the war there. Generally, it's been, I think, seen as a positive thing in terms of their interaction in the communities. You might want more, council person. I don't want more. You know what I mean? But if you can, you might be able to guide a bit more.
Just to explain, all this money is funded by the government.
Yeah.
So there's
That's
no
what I
Chorley
pointed
money.
out at the beginning.
Yeah, so it's all funded by the government.
Yeah.
There are various schemes. The Arab and Accra scheme is Afghans who work with the British Army, who have been entitled to have residency in the UK. There is a forced migration report that County Council put together. So the County Council collate all the information on forced migration across all of Lancashire. We can let you have a sight of that. It's a confidential report. But I'm sure I've asked previously at Lancashire Leaders if it can be shared with members of my group and others on a confidential basis. We can share that with you.
Thank you.
But in summary, it's fair to say that Chorley has one of the lower numbers of forced migration in the whole of Lancashire. And that's particularly because we don't have any migration hotels, and other areas do. South Ribble, for example, have had, and in fact they had 2. So, and we have been very conscious that both we support the programme across the country, but we don't do more than our fair share. Chorley does not do, the numbers that a lot of neighbouring councils are doing.
As I say, it's a small contribution. But just, Bev, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to. I can briefly sorry. Just briefly take you through what some of the schemes mean, because it's all sort of, so the UK resettlement scheme is a scheme that identifies refugees, and the money from the government is for structured casework, to help them settle in the local area. Afghan resettlement scheme is just, we said, Homes for Ukraine, about. The Asylum Seekers and Dispersal Fund, that came about because a couple of years ago the government moved to what's called a policy of dispersal, which meant that rather than have everybody in the south, they decided to put them all over the country. And that is mainly under Serco, and we have limited involvement in it. But all of these schemes are very tightly controlled by the government, so there is quite a lot of underspend because we don't have as many as other areas, and they've got to be spent on certain things, and you've got to report back on what you have used the money for. So if essentially it was because the government decided to move to dispersal policy that these schemes came into existence.
And just to clarify the reason, in Chorley we could have done what other areas have done, which is rent houses on behalf of these people and then pay private landlords. What Chorley did was, with acquired premises, the government's paid the rent on them, those people then move on elsewhere, those houses then can be recycled for Chorley residents and indigenous people with need, if we need to do it. They're not ring fenced for that, they are our properties, we can choose to rent them to immigrants if there's a forced dispersal scheme, or residents of Chorley, and some of them have been recycled into residents of Chorley as part of our aspiration to provide more social housing directly. Is that clear? You probably need a briefing off the Chief Exec at some point.
Sorry?
You probably need a briefing off the Chief Exec at some point, Councillor Perks.
But we've asked for meetings and we've not had it yet.
Have you not?
If the council has actually got a strategy on that, in that it's would help to pass on to get increased visitors into the town centre, in particular, because later on in some of the projects that the council is heavily involved in, I presume there's been a drop in the tenancy of the Market Walk and other things, and that will lead to another question later on.
Okay.
But of actually encouraging more visitors to come in Chorley.
Yeah. So we were very clear going back, in fact, you'd have been on the council, Councillor Perks, when we took control in 2012, that it was clear from the previous administration that car parking was just seen as a cash cow, and with no due respect to the fact that people weren't visiting the town. So we have reduced car parking charges significantly when we took over, because we do believe that people, yes, please use public transport, it makes sense, but there are many times when you can't and it's not practical, and we need people to visit the town, and a vibrant town centre needs people to be able to come and visit and park. So I think our car park, we reduced parking charges to £1, didn't we, for 3 hours, which was a significant reduction, as I said, from the previous administration. And we kept it at that rate for a very, very long time. It has gone up on car parks just recently, but I still think to park in Chorley for even £2 for 3 hours is exceptionally cheap when you compare it to surrounding neighbouring towns. So you're absolutely right. Yes, we do look at car parking in terms of making sure that we're setting a price that covers, obviously you've got to cover the cost of running the things, or try to, but it's set primarily with the view of we need to make sure that Chorley is still attractive for people to come into and park and use, and it's user-friendly. And that's what directs the policy and the thinking on car parking.
And the strategy's been set in liaison with the town team, which is chaired by Councillor G, on the grounds that what the point of the car parking charges isn't around, unfortunately, like the last Conservative administration that just uses the cash cow and put people off coming to Chorley, which I presume Councillor Perks at that time supported. What this policy is aimed at is to get people parking in the right places. So we've got longer stay car parks and short stay car parks. So there's recently been a campaign by, I think it was a Reform councillor in his charity, to get the flat iron changed, which is ridiculous, because on the flat iron, what was happening when we had a longer period of parking on the flat iron, people were going to the cinema and clogging up the flat iron car park while they went to the cinema for 3 or 4 hours for a visit, and then, with their family. What we need on the flat iron is a churn of shoppers coming in, shopping for an hour or what have you, and then moving on and opening those spaces up for other people. And the town centre traders realised that, they pushed for that, they lobbied for that. What we also then said was that the people then could park for 3 hours across the road from the cinema on the Friday Street car park, where there's a multi-storey option, and just walk across the road. It's almost as close to the cinema, but it's geared up for that kind of use. And that's the naivety, unfortunately, that person who's making that campaign, which was saying the council will get more money. They won't, because the council will get less money, because shops will close and businesses will close in the town centre. So it's a very short-sighted thing to just raise car parking charges or cheapen car parking charges without speaking to those traders first, which is what we've done, which is why we have a far more harmonious town centre parking arrangements, where not everybody can park exactly where they want, when they want, but what everything does is it feeds the businesses in the town centre, which are the lifeblood of Chorley as a market town. And the second point, which you came back to about visitor numbers dropping, visitor numbers have increased. They're back to increased on pre-COVID numbers, only recently because when COVID happened, there was generally a tail off in most shopping and retail centres. They've built back gradually and now they're in excess of that, which again is contrary to what's happening in Bolton, Preston, Wigan, etc., our surrounding towns, Blackburn. They're seeing continued lower numbers of footfall. And similarly, the council's doing lots of work around bringing coach parties in. So we've got more coaches now than ever before in Chorley Town Centre on a Tuesday and on a Saturday, because we control the bus station, because the county council previously, when it was run by the Conservatives, and while it was run by the current administration, failed to utilise that asset in any shape or form or have a plan for it. So it's all about having a coordinated plan about getting people into Chorley. And that is why people constantly come to Chorley. And in fact, Graham Lively the other week said, I can't believe how cheap it is to park in Chorley. When he visited, you know, it's ridiculous. We don't have this anywhere else in Lancashire. The cheapest in Lancashire.
If I can go back though to the first question on it, this unexpected income from the charges then, it is caused by what?
It's the first year of a change. So we made a change last year as part of the strategy. We put the charges up. So rather than putting the charges up by 20p each year, we said, right, from £1, we'll go to £1.50 on some parts or £2 on some car parks. That will then sit in place and there's no proposal to change it for a number of years to come. So it's a surge at the moment, but it'll level off and it's been costed in over the period as it settles down. Because with inflation, as it is, we're fast eroding into that increase.
So this unexpected income, will that be used on the car parks or is it going to be put into the general budget of the council?
Yeah.
So in a way, it's a bit like what you were accusing before, that back in the early 20s, it was seen as a cash cow. It's still a bit of a cash cow then.
No, it's just come in because we've just raised it by a round number as opposed to putting it up by an increment every year. Because residents, we consulted residents and said, what would you rather do? And what they said was they'd rather see fewer increases and put it up, you know, to still a cheap level, but do it in one go and get it out of the way. And businesses said the same. But the problem is they have confusion if prices keep changing on car parks because people start driving around the town centre looking for somewhere cheaper to park. And given we hadn't put it up for 10 years before, it was due a rise.
Right, move on to the next question. The bus station. It was good that you mentioned it because I'm still with the next question. Looking at the figures that you've put in the report, the last 3 years has seen a considerable maintenance cost each year, and the county council gave you an amount of money, a grant, 650,000, and currently there's only 220,000 left. Is this going to be sufficient to cover any future maintenance, or else LCC loaded Chorley with an expensive asset to maintain?
I missed the first part of the
Right.
question.
So,
I was distracted just on a point that the questioners do have time limits, by the way.
oh, do they?
They
Right.
do, so
We'll have to speed up. Right.
you'll have to
What, the
speed
answers
up
or the questions?
the questions.
Right. I didn't know that.
There is.
The bus station came with a dowry, which we had to wrangle out of, I think is the best way of putting it, LCC, because they didn't want to give us anything. But they did accept that they hadn't invested in those premises for a long, long time. Again, probably back to your days, Mark, in the old days, that there would have been no investment because in the nicest possible way, Lancashire County Council's priority wasn't Chorley and getting people in to visit Chorley. So the bus station has become less used. In fact, they drove buses to parking on the bypass to decamp passengers because the bus companies wouldn't pay the fees because it wasn't worth going to the bus station. That's the ridiculous situation we got to under the last Conservative administration. As a result, we've spent quite a bit of money, as you said, putting a lot of that work that they didn't do in place and repairing the roofs and recladding it and all the rest of it and doing up inside. So a lot of that money's been spent now and that will last us for a number of years. So we're just into a maintenance programme. What we're trying to do, and the aim is, by moving more retail units in, by moving the police in who will pay a rent, to get people in the bus station who will help pay towards the management costs of it. The other benefit we have is because we own Market Walk, which makes a good return for the town, is that we can share the maintenance costs of Market Walk Shopping Centre and the other units we have around the town centre with the bus station, whereas the county was on a bit of a limb. So they didn't have a way of helping to pay for the maintenance costs of the bus station. So the idea is for it to be break even within the next couple of years, Whether it does or not will depend on whether we can get commercial operators in there to pay the rent. But we are optimistic to do that. And also what we've done is, as part of the improvements, we've made it cheaper to operate because the heating of it, the maintenance of it, the janitorial bit of it, to quote an earlier report, is a lot cheaper because we've cheapened it up by the way we've improved it, which is a sensible proposal in my view.
Right, before I come to the final question, just point out the 16 years that was on the county council, 8 of them were under a Labour administration as well. And I think you would find the Labour administration
I'd agree
was
with you
no different
wholeheartedly,
from
Mark.
Conservative
Oh, they were very
administration
different. They just
on
didn't-
how it operated the bus station. I want to point that out. Last question. On the project, Appendix A, the projects that you have got for Market Walk, Strawberry Meadow, Strawberry Fields, Primrose, Tatton Gardens, Chorley, Borough Council Property Limited. Notice on the Market Walk, I mentioned about where perhaps tenants moving out. There's been a fall in income for Market Walk. Can I ask what's that attributed, please?
Yeah, happy to do that. COVID, number one, because in COVID, a lot of national retailers came back and renegotiated their rents with landlords across the country. Obviously, there is a decrease in town centre shopping. So people like, let's pick a name at random, Iceland, have renegotiated all their tenants, their agreements across the country. And the weird thing about commercial property rentals around, particularly shopping centres, etc., is it the actual price isn't set on the rent you pay for the unit. It's set on the floor area by a notional rate. So your tenants will come to you and say, I'm going to pay this rate on this floor area across all that area. And you've got a choice at that point. You either lose them and then try and get somebody else in, or you will pay more money, or you accept that that's the current rate market. And they can also go to a tribunal. And a number of these large retailers have gone to tribunals, and by going to a tribunal in Preston, Wigan, Bolton, Blackburn, wherever, that would set the benchmark for what they get in a tribunal in Chorley. So sometimes our hands are tied. So the rental has gone down because the overall retail market tribunal outcomes have come down. Not because of the value of Chorley or the value of Blackburn or Bolton or Wigan or Preston. It's because that the tribunal sets a benchmark and then it's enforced elsewhere. So unfortunately, that's the way the world works. By the same token, landlords benefit when the market goes the other way. So if the market starts to go up for any reason, then everybody benefits as a landlord. That is the strange world when I first came into it, being involved with council, because I was unaware of retail rental values in the past because it wasn't in my world. It's a very strange world to operate in, but it's again something the chief exec could probably take you through, or Neil could take you through about how that works, which is why we find it very hard to challenge when the retailers come back and want to drop there. We have to come to a compromise with them, and we try and get the best deal at that time for Chorley. What we tend to do is build in break clauses, so when there's then a break clause in a couple of years' time, we can come back and renegotiate it up if the wider world has changed. We don't know where the wider world will be, but that's the main driver on that. So several of the larger national retailers have renegotiated. Some we get on a deal where we do a profit share. So if they expand their units or they put units in and they're over trading, we can get some recovery by them over trading. And we've applied that on certain units in Market Walk. So you've got to use a different number of mechanisms to get the best value return for Chorley residents out of Market Walk. But it's not a case of chucking that operator out and getting a new operator in who will pay more, because that new operator will come in and pay the same rent that the other previous one did, and you've gone through all the hassle of having to close the unit down, reopen it, etc. We have done that at times, and we've had retailers in the past who said they were not going to pay any rent because we need them more than they need us, i.e. you need us in your town centre because we bring footfall in for other shops, and they've tried to pay no rent. We eventually have got them to pay a rent, whether that's a market rent or not a market rent, depends on how you value them.
That's been happening every year since COVID.
That's been happening before COVID because the market goes up and down depending on what the retail world is doing, and also depending on the kind of retailers you've got. Which is why one of the reasons that Chorley is very successful compared to other places is we don't have a lot of those multiple retailers, but they do set the benchmark for the rest of the town centre. It's a bit different with owner-occupied retailers who have a different model because it's their sole income or their sole entity. But the bigger units are, you know, the people we're talking about. We're talking about the Boots, the B&Ms and the Icelands of this world. But that's what people come into the town centre for, isn't it? They don't come into the town centre for the shops they can get in the villages, Mark. Is that okay? I think it would be helpful, again, if you could pick this up with the Chief Exec when you're meeting with him and learn about how that operates, because it is quite a niche knowledge base.
Well, we did ask for a meeting
Just for clarity, Councillor Perks, a request came in for a meeting earlier this week. Director of Finance has responded with the offer of it. We haven't yet received a clarification about your group's availability. So just from an officer point of view, just to be clear, we are more than happy to meet with the Reform Group. I'm meeting with you on Monday. Director of Finance has offered to meet at a convenient time for you, and obviously we've just had a discussion about joining one of your group meetings.
And town centre team and assets, the development and assets working group discuss all this kind of stuff around yields of the units within Market Walk, etc. So there is in-depth discussion at that development and asset working group. So I'd encourage you to get members on there who are interested in this kind of thing. Not yet, no, but the papers are there from previous reports. Where are we, Peter? Sorry. The report was proposed.
Yeah.
Sorry, questions? Any more questions on the report on the revenue budget? No. In that case, the recommendations that Peter made were in paragraphs 2 and 3. Someone want to second that, please? Thank you, Councillor Hilton. All those in favour, please show. Cool, thank you. Item 7 is the pre-touted capital and balance sheet outturn report, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So, as it says in the report, the capital budget at the last meeting was projected to be stand at, wasn't projected, but it did stand at just over £15 million. That has now been revised. We can see that now stands at just over £10 million. And if we go on to page 63, we get a breakdown there of the variations. The main reason for the change is simply, or £5.1 million of the change rather, is the reprofiling of those schemes. So in other words, they're not being undertaken in the quarter that we're reporting on. They're being put back in again. If you turn to page 64, we can see there the full list of what's been still in the programme, but not in the, but pushed back in terms of, of when we expect that to come forward and when we need that money and when those projects will begin. So again, there is a breakdown. I won't go through each item, but there is a breakdown again of those items in the report. And then coming to the point I made slightly earlier and prematurely about the borrowing and investments section, we can see there that the net borrowing costs have gone down slightly compared to the budget set at the beginning of the year. And likewise, we can see the total borrowing, again, compared to where we were at 31st of March 25 to where we are now, has reduced. In terms of council tax collections and business rate collection, we can see there the position from last year, 31st of March 25, as opposed to March this year. The rates almost identical in terms of the collection rates, which is obviously a good thing for the council. And as we were discussing on the other day, Chair, we are one of the highest collection rates in Lancashire, which is obviously, again, good news for residents in terms of making sure, and the council in terms of getting our collections in on time and the money then put forward to local services. Pause there.
And good to County Council mainly.
Well, absolutely.
They're delighted with it.
They're over the moon.
Any questions on that report? Thank you, Peter. No? Right, okay, thank you. Any other questions on that report? In that case, Peter's proposed it. Would somebody like to second it, please? Councillor France at the back. All those in favour, please show. Good stuff. Thank you very much. We move on to item 8. Councillor Wilson again, which is the Chorley Q4 Performance Monitoring Report, pages 75 to 118.
Okay, so as we mentioned before, the performance in terms of the delivery of the key corporate strategy projects is very, very good, with 100% of those projects, which is 17 in total, rated as green or complete. In terms of the corporate strategy and measures which fall behind that, we can see that 75% of those are performing on or above target, and 67% of the key service measures likewise are on target. So if I may, Chair, just a couple of highlights from the report in terms of the delivery of those key projects and strategies. We've completed the work on Gillibrand Street for the homeless units for families. The weekly food waste collections have been introduced and, of course, rolled out with a take-up, excuse the pun, but going up and up and up, as it were, as people adapt to the new system. The climate change strategy has been refreshed. We've refreshed the biodiversity strategy. The decarbonisation works on the town hall and council buildings are underway, as we can see with the scaffolding around the building. In terms of affordable housing plan, again, that has been developed and refreshed along with the tenancy strategy, which we'll hear a little more about in a moment later on the meeting. And then the destination management plan, again, we're sort of coming into the second phase in that, in terms of we've had a year of activity in terms of events, whether that's been like the 10K that happened recently, the flower show's about to come, of course, Picnic in the Park just took place last weekend. And it's about actually trying to connect those and connect other tourist destinations and other activities and other things that attract people to Chorley, and bring that all together to make sure that we have that we remain a viable and strong location for people to visit and spend the money. In terms of the indicators and measures that we constantly review, we can see there that in terms of the number of we've delivered 96 affordable homes against a target of 75. We've had our improvements to 8 parks and open spaces improved against a target of 6. Town centre vacancy rate, which Councillor Perks was sort of alluding to before, is down at 7.3%, which is the lowest it has been for a number of years, which is obviously a good thing. We've supported 351 community groups. Our homeless prevention work is again ahead of target. Our number of jobs created through council support is again above target. Number of engagements with businesses is almost double the target. People on benefit claimants between 60 and 64, again, we've outperformed Lancashire and the national average. We are lower. And likewise, on the flip side, our employment rate is higher in Chorley than it is in Lancashire or across the nation. And the number of visits to leisure centres, again, is exceeding targets. There's a number of positives there in terms of, as I say, the projects that have been undertaken and the actual performance behind it. Where we are slightly off target on the reports, just well, that I'd mention, one is the NEETs, so that's the people not in education, employment or training, and we can see there that the figure there is we're just off target. We're at 4.6 against a target of 3.9%. However, it is worth mentioning that it's coming down, so it is coming in the right direction. But clearly we are off target. Now, we've seen lots of things in national press about it. We've seen lots of things being debated. It is a real challenge. It's a challenge everywhere, but it's one that we need to be involved in. So it's not something that we deliver ourselves. We are not the sole contributor to this. In fact, many other services are influence this, but we do need to play our role, and we'll continue to do so. And it just gives some detail in the report as to exactly what we are doing and what we have done to help those numbers come down. And then likewise, the increase in visitor numbers, we're aiming for an increase of 2%. I mentioned the destination management plan is being rolled out, as I say, and that currently is performing at 1.4. So again, there's lots of work to do there, but hopefully through this summer, with the events and with the efforts being made to sort of tie into the tourism networks, we can hopefully get ourselves back on track.
Just need some sunshine.
We need some sunshine, more important than anything else. Yeah.
Thank you. Have you finished?
Done.
Right, thank you. Any questions on that report? Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the NEETs, looking at the action plan, it's a bit disappointing to see that you've not got anywhere in there using the Inspire Youth Zone in Chorley, Signify, because I know at county level, when I was the cabinet member for young people, the youth zones across the different boroughs were vital in trying to get some of these young people involved, because they didn't necessarily want, if they weren't in employment, there was nowhere else for them to go. Are there any plans to specifically to use?
Can I invite, as it's Councillor Murray's department, as it were, can I invite her to address your question?
Thank you, Chair. What I would say is the last project we did on NEETs, which ran from August 25 to March 26, was focused on 16 to 18-year-olds. And what we found very useful was it identified the barriers to what, why people are NEET. And one of them was that they didn't like group sessions. They preferred the one-to-one. And the other thing with the Inspire Youth Zone is we have a high number of NEETs in Clayton and Coppell. So to come in to Inspire, you would have to travel there. And one of the barriers is actually travel, as well as people having EHCP plans and there being no provision for them as they move out of high school. There was quite some concerns about young people that had caring issues, whether they were young parents themselves or whether they were caring for elderly parents. And there was also quite a few that were home educated that became NEET. So what this has done means that, finding out all this information means we can now inform our delivery moving forward. So we can look to more one-to-one sessions and more outreach in the communities like Coppell and Clayton. Oh, sorry, and also my I don't know what the word is, my frustration that I really think the colleges should be doing a little bit more, because it just seems that I know we do meet with Runshaw and we have conversations with Wigan and Preston, but I do think perhaps they could take a little bit more responsibility, because it would seem that once they get the money for the child and they drop off, then they don't. I think there could be a little bit more engagement.
Just to add to that question quickly, two things. One is there is work done around employment with the people who go to the young people who go to the youth zone, but they are the under 16s. They're not around the NEETs. They are pre-NEET. And Councillor Margaret France will point out that we've had numerous discussions in this council chamber about NEETs starting at 4 and 5 years old, because they tend to be on a pathway from 4 or 5 years old. The kids who are not school ready tend to be disproportionate needs at the end of their school careers. So there's a whole pathway. So there is work done within the youth zone around pointing young people towards education, training and what have you, but it's not part of that NEET programme. There's another point is Lancashire County Council's actually got the overall responsibility for NEET, and they don't put any money at all into the youth zone at all, and they never have done. Chorley's funded that youth zone because Lancashire refused to do it. So apart from an initial amount of money at the start. So there is a failure here of the county councils doing its job. But we're more than happy to stand in because we actually value the young people of Chorley. Bev, did you want to answer? Oh, sorry, Mark, you asked another question, sorry.
Thanks. That's good to hear that you're looking at doing more one-to-one work, because that is the most successful. I've got to admit, when I visited Indley Remand Centre, it was quite difficult for young people there who were placed either between the Manchester block or the Liverpool block. I did actually ask, it was 8 at the time from the Chorley district, and when we asked them about what was the thing that could have prevented them from ending up in the situation they were, they said they weren't interested in sport and stuff like that. Now, I know Chorley Council has done lots of things around the sport, but they said they would have benefited more from other things. Is the council looking at it with all the community centres that we have, and especially that you've said in the likes of Coppell, that if an outreach team are going in, they're going to provide alternatives than just the standard sport thing, which seems to be the message a lot of councils across the country do, and they don't work.
No, well, as I say, sort of what we found out has informed us, so that will be reflected. But you are right, there is an assumption that, do sport, it's good for your mental health and everything will be all right and you'll get it. And it's just not true, because it's not for everybody, is it? So we do need to look at more tailored support. And I think also what there is a challenge is that if you live in Coppell, you tend to go to Wigan College, because it's, rather than Runshaw, because it's difficult to get to. If you live at Clayton, you look more towards Preston. And of course, Wigan and Preston have their own issues and deprivation, so we get a bit squeezed as well, I think. And that's just because of the way that Chorley is and its location.
There has been local programmes as well, both within, from memory, Coppell and Buckshaw, around specific needs within those smaller communities. to drill down into, because the numbers are actually, the percentage is low, but it's actually quite a low number of individuals, which means it's more manageable. So we are drilling down into those particular areas, and Clayton as well, because those hotspots need to be dealt with on a very hyper-local level. And there is investment from this council going into that through Jennifer Mullins' department. Again, it'd be good to upskill yourself on what's going on currently, because there is a lot going on. There will be gaps for definite, because there always is, but because all these people are individuals. But what we need to do is do as many different things as we can to catch as many people within the net. You're quite right, Mark. Yourself off. Any more questions, Councillor France?
It's not so much a question as an observation. I think the time to start looking at the NEET situation is not when these children are 14 or 15, but when they're 5 or younger. And I just want to say what a fantastic day we had this week at the opening of the baby zone within Youth Zone. Absolutely terrific. 176 people through the door on the very first day. And that was a real tribute to Chorley Council for supporting that. So the children that become NEETs are those who are not school ready, who can't sit quietly to have a story read to them and are not toilet trained. If you start school at 5 with already set up to fail, then these are the children that we're going to have problems with in later years. So it's no use starting at the teenage age. You start before they start school, and that's what Chorley's committed to do now, not just with its work at Chorley Youth Zone, but also with the community work. Thank you.
And the baby zone is out the youth zone, isn't it? And again, it's about getting upstream of these problems. So you're dealing with the needs of the next 15 years or whatever it's going to be, however long they take to get through there. Okay, sound. Right, any other questions or observations? No. In that case, nothing else on the performance report, no? Peter's proposed that recommendation to the review, to review the report and provide feedback were required. That's recommendation, to review the report and provide feedback required. We don't know vote on that, do we? You think I'd know by now, wouldn't you? Right, thank you for that. Item 9, insurance policies. It's getting more exciting as you go on, Peter.
Yeah, nothing more exciting than insurance. So as the report's very, quite a short report for the reasons as it's self-explanatory. Quite simply, is obviously the council's insurance is due for renewal. We are obviously entering the world of local government reform potentially, so there are some big changes coming down when we would have to do this again. So rather than do it now and then be doing it again in a year or a year and a half, the proposal is to just extend the current contract with the current provider, and then obviously when we revisit when local government reform has been undertaken, we will revisit and go out to a full contract. There seems little point spending a lot of money on a tender process to then redo it again inside sort of 18 months or 2 years. So that's just the proposal on the basis of hopefully common sense prevailing.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments on that report? No? No real line. Okay. So the recommendations Peter's made are in paragraphs 2 and 3. Any seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Murray. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's great. We move on to item 10, which is Councillor Whiffin, amendments to Chorley Council and South Ribble Council's tenancy strategies, pages 125 to 148. All yours, Jenny.
So this report is simply about updating Chorley's current tenancy strategy and bringing it together with South Ribble's tenancy strategy, so it's just one joint strategy. So basically, just in case you're not, which I'm sure you are, but just in case of any new members in the room, a tenancy strategy is about how a council allocates its housing, so vacancies, available, allocation, length and renewal of circumstances, that kind of thing. So back in 2012-2013, both councils did create their own separate strategies. And although the overall aims today are still relevant, a lot has changed over time in terms of national housing policies. Members may want to refer to paragraph 3 if you want a brief explanation about this. So one of the biggest changes that has been the government's shift away from affordable rent and towards social rent housing. So when the original strategies were written, national policy strongly promoted affordable rent products. So this was where rent could be set at about 80% or 80% of market rent levels as a ceiling price. However, over time, there's been growing recognition that affordable rent is still too expensive for residents. I know that members in this room have shared those concerns as well, particularly with the current cost of living crisis. So again, you might want to look to paragraph 8 of this report, which highlights that the objectives of the strategy are closely linked to preventing homelessness and ensuring tenancy sustainment, with a clear focus on ensuring social housing remains secure and genuinely affordable for those who need it. So the government policy has now shifted towards social rental housing, and this is where rents are linked to local incomes instead of market rent. So it should reflect and should be genuinely more affordable for residents. As well as this, the Refresh strategy also updates housing figures across both boroughs, so both Chorley and South Ribble, including the increase in council-owned and managed homes. So if you look at section 1.4 of the appended strategy, it explains the transfers of the council's housing stock in 2007, and it notes the subsequent increase in council-owned accommodation. So yeah, given previous discussions, if you've not been here, regarding the council's direct role in housing provision, members, you might find this particularly interesting because it gives you a helpful context on the council's housing role over time. So yeah, rather than continuing 2 separate strategies, the proposal is simply to create one joint strategy with Chorley and South Ribble. This is a good idea. I think it reflects the close working relationship between the 2 councils. Of course, we have a shared register with Select Move as well, which is mentioned in paragraph 9, I believe. So it's going to create a consistent approach across both the boroughs. Most importantly, I think it doesn't change the council's overall approach or priorities around housing. It's just simply about updating it and reflecting the national policy, and it's going to properly support the delivery of good quality, affordable housing across both boroughs. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. That's great. Any questions on that paper from anybody? No. In that case, the recommendation is to review and approve the proposed changes to tenancy strategy in paragraph 2. Jenny's proposed it. Somebody happy to second that, please? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you, and that's implemented. Right, that brings us to the end of part 1 papers. So we unfortunately have to propose exclusion of the public and press. I will propose that. Can I have a seconder, please? Can everybody vote on excluding the public and press?